let's get started. Yeah, I've been to BSides Vienna. That is always in end of the year, like the last 2 editions already. And yeah, I'm from Vienna. I always describe Vienna like the city of. Come on. No. No. Yes. City of fatty foods.
That's it.
Yes. No, this is. What is up with you? Classical architecture and classical music. Yeah, but that's the only way how we can win anything around music anymore. So, I work for Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch, Elasticstack, and I'm part of the infrastructure team, so internal tooling, AWS, Docker containers, all these things. And then I always say, this is a Unix pipe. I kind of pipe that into developer advocacy. So I'm doing lots of conferences. If you have any questions afterwards, come to me quickly because I need to head to Russia in the afternoon. Yeah. And I also run some meetups in Vienna, one about databases and one about the theoretical side of stuff like papers. Do you have a Papers Munich group? Papers We Love Munich? It's kind of a worldwide thing. You read an academic paper each month and then you just discuss it like in a study group. And while you hated it at university, you kind of do it voluntarily now. Yeah. So I guess everybody knows that one, Little Bobby Tables. So NoSQL, not only SQL, where you generally don't have SQL. Without SQL, no SQL injections, right? Problem solved. Who thinks that is kind of true? Like there are no SQL, obviously no SQL injections, but no injections in NoSQL products. Anybody? Okay, we'll see. So let's talk about MongoDB because it's the most widely used one. And because it's also web scale. Maybe people still remember that one in the heydays of NoSQL. Like there was this comic making fun of MongoDB, like, oh, you need to use it because it's web scale, and throw away your SQL database. Yeah, stuff has changed since then, but still most widely used. And let's see how it goes there. So SQL injections are probably not since there is no SQL. But you can do stuff like that. If anybody still remembers the Aspera, that was the, like, lots of years ago, the Facebook killer or whatever, the decentralized social network stuff, which got $1 million venture capital, I think, and then nothing ever got out of it. But a few interesting security articles. For example, I think it was Ruby, and they had stuff like that. So they have defined $where they kind of define a condition for MongoDB, and then they just throw a string against it. And while it's not an SQL injection, obviously that is a script injection. Whatever you put in there, you can just, close whatever you're doing and run some other arbitrary script there. So don't do that. That was found in the Aspera script. They got rid of that eventually, but it didn't help them. They didn't really make it. So stuff you should watch out for if you write MongoDB queries, for example, is these. DBEval, kind of the obvious one, but the others as well. Like if you run any of these and you pass in some strings, if you just do dumb string concatenations, you probably have injection problems, or you could have them, because it's just running some random script. Don't just take that unsanitized. You can turn off scripting, and I don't really know why it's enabled, because it's normally really bad performance-wise, and security-wise it's not great either. But yeah, you can either pass it as a parameter to the MongoDB process, or you can just disable it in the script, in the config, or you can, they have these weird code W scope blocks, like you can put scripts into that and that should be properly escaped. I've never tried that, but normally just disable scripting in the database. Like, why would you even have scripting in the database? And then we had something from Saarland, 2015, when they just scanned the internet for open MongoDB databases, and they found quite a lot of them. And as it often happens, like academia is first, and then it takes some time to actually get out to the real world. And in probably January this year, it was pretty much that far. when people started ransomware attacks on data stores. So they would hopefully back up the data somewhere, then delete it and leave a note, hey, pay us that amount of money and you will get your data back. Though from what I've heard, sometimes they don't actually take the backups. They will just delete your data and leave the message. And yeah, if you pay, you're not getting your data back. But that's just accidental. So that is not what you want. Quick show of hands. Who thinks that MongoDB only binds to localhost? Nobody. But they do. Like in recent versions, like I think they changed it 2 or 3 years ago already. Also for them it was a learning experience. Before they bound to all interfaces just to be easy to get started. But for 2 or 3 years they have been binding just to localhost by default. So anybody who can be attacked over the internet actually changed that settings at some point. Who thinks that authentication is enabled by default? Unfortunately, that is not the case. So their only protection is they will bind just to localhost, and if you change that, you're supposed to change authentication as well. And obviously, nobody does that. So let's see, what do they even have? Do they even have something like authentication and authorization? Yes, but you need to enable it with auth true, which is not that hard. They had one implementation previously, which was the challenge response MongoDB thingy. And in more recent versions, they have a new implementation called Scram SHA-1, which seems like, just from looking at it, very solid. They're using an official standard, and they've added some nice features. So you have stuff like you can define the iteration count for hashing. You have assault per user now, and not only per server anymore. They have finally gotten rid of MD5. And also the server authenticates against the clients and not only the other way around. So that looks very promising. You just need to use it. Just to show you, unfortunately, it's a bit of a dance around the system to get it started. So these are the predefined roles. There are lots of roles. You can just use them. You can create your own. It's maybe even too many because it's a bit confusing. But how do you enable them? So normally what you would do is you start your process with the no auth flag, so you can log in for the first time, and those are pretty much the default parameters. And then you can just say, I'm creating a user, Philipp password, and I have the role root on the admin database. And then you exit it. So first you create your user, then you exit it. Then you start your database again, that's the first line, and instead of no auth, we're just saying auth, so we're authenticating against it now. If I then just do the Mongo, so MongoD is always the server process and Mongo is the client process. So if I use Mongo localhost admin, I'm trying to connect to the MongoD process on localhost default port to the admin database. If I run any command like show DBs, it will throw me an error because you're not authenticated. Now you really need authentication. So we're trying again with that line. I'm actually providing my user. It will ask interactively for my password. And then I can create another non-admin user who can read from test A and write and read to test B. And then we can leave that again, because you probably don't want to use your admin user for anything, because as soon as somebody gets that, you're done again. So then Alice authenticates. Will this line work here? What will happen here? Any guesses? So we have said read on test A and read write on test B. So that is,
to test B.
So we're connecting to test A. We're trying to write something that we fail. Yeah. Then we're switching, so the find here will work. Then we're switching to the B database. In that example, yes, we can write, we can read, then we're switching to the C database. Can I even switch to the C database, do you think?
You shouldn't.
Yes, but you can. Unfortunately, that makes scripting pretty difficult because you can switch to a database, but you don't have any permissions on it. So the error will only happen here if you do the find. So yeah, but that is kind of the dance you need to do to create the root user and to create a dedicated user for whatever you want to do. And then you can use it in a secure fashion. SSL, as far as I know, it's still commercial, but the commercial part is only like the binaries don't contain in it, but the source code does. So if you compile the source code yourself, you can have SSL support. Yeah, everybody needs to make money somewhere. I find this a weird decision, but yeah. Anyway, continuing to Redis. Anybody using Redis? It's so simple and nice, right? And it has some very unique security features. Do you think it binds to all interfaces? Who thinks yes? Who thinks no? So it does, but with a little trick. Since a pretty recent version, like less than a year ago, they added something called protected mode. So it will bind to all interfaces, but it will only respond to queries on localhost with the actual result. And for remote queries, it will just throw a message like, oh, you're not properly authenticated in your remote system, fix that. So it's not working, but it's not working correctly either. It's just showing you what you need to do, which I find actually a kind of a user-friendly approach. It's not just blocking you, but it will tell you, okay, you need to change that to work. But by default, it will bind to all interfaces. And yeah, they have something like authentication, but there is no authorization at all. Like pretty binary, yes or no access. And even in their documentation, they call it a tiny layer of authentication, which I find a very nice quote. Like it's so tiny, nearly doesn't exist. So what you can do is you can say auth password if you have set password in the Redis configuration file. And then you can run your commands. Problem is the password is stored in plaintext in the Redis conf. I think it's also transmitted plaintext, and there is no SSL encryption or anything by default. And there's also no rate limiting. So Redis is very fast. So you can also run this auth command very fast. So you can pretty much just start brute forcing that one password there is. Yeah, but that's the authentication they have. And the other feature I find very nice is hiding commands. So they have, you set it in the configuration again, and you need to restart the server to change that. It's a bit securities through obscurity. So what they have is, if you have the command config, you can say rename the command config to my secret config name. So it's just like the command is still there, you just don't know what it's called. And one common approach is that you take the parameter or the command name, add some salt, and then just MD5 hash it, and then you know, okay, that is the hash, and if I use that hash, I'm using actually that command. Yeah, but since the networking is not encrypted, like anybody listening on the wire can just see what your commands are called. But yeah, they can rename commands, which is an interesting approach. What might make more sense is that you can kind of remove commands. You can just say they have an empty name, and then they're gone. Then you cannot access them anymore. So that is kind of their approach of removing features or limiting the use of specific features. And they have some commands they normally advise you to remove. So they have commands which make sense for a test service where you just drop all the keys you have in your key value store. But probably that's not what you want in your production system. And they support Lua scripting, and obviously don't pass in random Lua scripts. Otherwise bad stuff will happen. Okay. And Elasticsearch. Well, what do we have? We had some security issues over the years. Yeah, they're on our website, so we try to document them as publicly as possible. And if you take a closer look, these are the most severe ones, and they were related to scripting, that somebody could break out of the sandbox. So in the beginning, we had Groovy scripting because it was, since Elasticsearch is written in Java, it was very easy to add and use, and you have just scripts. but it's very hard to contain Groovy scripts. It's a general purpose programming language, so you can do lots of interesting stuff. And that turned out to be very hard to contain to a sandbox. And for example, an ex-work colleague of mine, he once had an Elasticsearch server running somewhere. And yeah, somebody, I don't know which one, probably the middle one, the Groovy sandbox escape, and somebody took over his box and started spamming the world. I think it was sending so many emails he couldn't even SSH into the box anymore because the network connection was so unstable. Yeah, so that was kind of a problem. And at Elastic we were kind of like, maybe we should do something. It's not the way we want this to go. So we added something called Painless to literally take the pain away. So Painless is our own scripting language. Yeah, so we hired a developer, we put him into a closet for a year, and he developed Painless there. Because there are not enough scripting languages, you can only always have n+1, and Painless is our n+1. And he even wrote a blog post afterwards about that. Why read a brand new language when there are already so many out there? We still did, because we kind of thought it's worth it, or because we thought there are no really good alternatives for that. So there were two goals, security and performance. Security, no more CVEs on sandbox escapes and scripting if possible. And performance, problem with Groovy scripting is I think it's interpreted every time it runs, so there is an overhead to that which we want to get rid of. So those were the two main goals of writing a custom scripting language. So just to give you a very quick example of what that looks like, the top line is a document, and I have played some, I don't know what that is. Hockey? No, I don't know. I've played 3 games and I've scored some goals and I haven't done any assists. And now in our scripting language, we want to know how many goals did I score in total. So syntax looks pretty familiar. The only thing that might be weird is like you say, input document that targets the documents we have up there, the attribute goals. Yeah, and then we operate on that. And we just add all the goals we have, and that is our final result. So the point is just to have a general purpose scripting language which cannot escape the sandbox and be performant. So it has some features which don't really make much or too much difference in the security concept unless that, for example. So we have method and field level whitelisting, so only certain stuff that we think makes sense is allowed, because I think that has bitten us in the past. So you cannot say class for name to just load any random class you have on the class path and then do weird stuff with it. So only kind of sensible stuff is allowed, and everything else is blacklisted. So you should not be able to escape that. And that was kind of the main point of creating that programming language. By now, Painless is the default. In the current version, we still have scripting language, the other scripting languages. Most people use Groovy, but we support Python and JavaScript as well. Though they are deprecated and will definitely go away in the next major version. So anybody doing scripting there, we try to force you onto the right path. Let's hope it works. Yeah, and then we have this authentication, authorization, and encryption thing. I know it's called SSL. We refactored all the encryption stuff in the latest major release. And I don't really know why, but unfortunately we called the parameter now everywhere SSL, because before we had TLS and SSL mixed. And obviously it is TLS, but we still call it SSL. So don't be confused by that. It's TLS, we just call it SSL for whatever reason, but it's the same everywhere now. So how does that work with Elasticsearch? Unfortunately, that is how my salary is being paid. So those are the commercial features we have. And just to show you how this can end up, let's do something live. So, Shodan, I guess everybody knows.
Oh, no, it's okay.
It's okay? Sorry, I'm not trying to touch anything. I guess everybody knows that site, right? You can just find stuff on the internet. There's just scanning what is out there. and then you can try using that. So we can just put in Elasticsearch here. And I hope my Wi-Fi, yep. So we have some stuff called Elasticsearch, but it's mostly for O1s. So they have a reverse proxy in front of that, so that is not going to help us. So we can just start searching for 200s. And we should get some more results. And we're actually down to less than 600 results now. And early this morning, I tried to log into those. And most of them, I don't know, are either not hacked or are probably a honeypot anyway. Like I'm pretty sure pretty much everything on that list is a honeypot anymore. So I didn't find anything that was too revealing there anymore. But what I guess all the script kiddies have used those up already. So you can just switch to port 9200, which is the default Elasticsearch port. And I'm going for 200s now. And that should lead us to more results. The demo gods are not with me. Oh, come on. No, Shodan is broken.
Too many results.
Yeah, probably too many results. Okay, since I have tried that, I think I have one working IP in my cache still, in my command history. So assume the site is up. You get like with that search, I got I think more than 100,000 results. You get an IP address, and now we're just looking, no touching, just looking. Let's see what we have. So since Elasticsearch is just providing a REST-based interface, it's very easy to just interact with it with curl. You don't need any fancy tools. I just found the IP address 54 blah 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 on port 9200, and then I'm using the API _cat. It's like cat, the command line tool, to just show you stuff in an easily consumable fashion. And indices. I'm just interested in which indices does this Elasticsearch data store have. And the question mark V is just show me the header information for that as well. And if I run that, it will tell me recruiters, talents, jobs, and then please read. And please read has a document count of 1. So that is kind of the sign that somebody has been here and done something. Let's see what is in that document. So I can copy, that part.
You can't say no to please read.
Yeah, we're very polite. So since this is all REST-based, this is the index we want to use. Now I want to search this. And I have a query, just show me everything. And I'm adding a pretty, so it's nicely formatted as well. And we should close that. And if I didn't mistype, what? Why? Oh wait. Please read search query pretty. My command line is broken as well.
Question mark before pretty. There must be an end. Yeah.
Sorry?
You put a question mark before pretty. You have to do an end.
This one is correct. No?
This one's correct.
Yes.
This one, yeah. Oh, I added it. Yeah, that was stupid typo. Yeah, and what you then get is something like this. Yeah, 0.5 Bitcoin. I don't know what is that today. 600 euro. So the problem is there is no real guarantee that they really took that backup. And I've already seen instances like there, at least a few weeks ago, there was not only one team or person doing that, but multiple ones, and they left different messages. And so kind of somebody deleted your data and left that message like, please pay that up. And then somebody else left another message. So they didn't remove the one message which like the original ransom message, but they just would add another ransom message, and then you probably would end up with 2 or 3 ransom messages, and then you would need to decide like who was there first, like who probably has your data, or maybe not, like you don't really know, and then you can just start paying them off and hope for the best. Yeah, but let's not let it get that far. So we've seen those. So the first thing you should do is, so by default, like everybody else by now, but that also changed like 1 or 2 years ago only, Elasticsearch is only bound to localhost, so you will explicitly need to change the configuration if you want to bind it somewhere else. Just put it on a private network only, like with any data store. There's no real point in having it on a public IP. Put a firewall in front of it, even though I've, like, people pinged me on Twitter and said, oh, our firewall kind of, like we had some bad rules and the firewall was just down for an hour and somebody still took down our data during that 1 hour. So firewalls are also not helping you all the time. And what you can also do is you can add a random port, but again, this is more like security through obscurity, which might help you or like give you a longer chance to avoid problems, but yeah, it's no real solution. And what you can do for free is you can just use a reverse proxy. So since it's all HTTP based and everybody has lots of experience with HTTP, you can use Nginx, HA proxy, whatever. Just put SSL there and basic auth and run that. Or we have a commercial extension for that as well. And the commercial extension can also do stuff like field level security or document level security, which you cannot easily do with reverse proxy. That is part of the cluster already, because one other common scenario where people had problems is they had their nice little proxy somewhere, but then they had some other way around that to access the data store. And yeah, the proxy didn't really help them. And if something bad happened, please make backups. Like if you don't have backups, you shouldn't be in charge of anybody's data anyway. So you can always reindex from another source or just restore a snapshot you've taken. And that is the only way to guarantee to get your data back. Like from what I've heard, the chances if somebody removed your data, it might not be that great. Even though from I think the instances you can find by now, most of them are just forgotten test instances or honeypots anyway. So I guess there is no point in starting a new ransom attack now if anybody feels very motivated. I guess like these fields have been harvested pretty well by now. Okay, to conclude, yes, injections are still a thing, even though NoSQL doesn't have SQL, or some have added kind of SQL-like interfaces by now as well. But injections are still a thing. Don't pass in any unescaped stuff that just executes in the data store. That is more something for the providers or vendors. Like, please enable security, but I guess this is pretty much a learning experience. MySQL didn't have authentication and authorization in the beginning. Then it didn't have that enabled by default. And I think the NoSQL world is kind of going through the same cycle as well, where at first you don't have much. Then you just bind to localhost. And at some later point you decide, okay, maybe we need to enable this security just by default. Creativity can be interesting or not. Like Redis is always, I'm always a bit torn. Like hiding the commands, is that cool feature or not a cool feature? On the other hand, I find that just answering queries on localhost and for remote queries, just showing no, fix that and configure that. That is kind of an interesting approach. Yeah, and at Elastic we think that custom scripting can make sense. So far we didn't have any security issues yet. We'll see what time brings in the long run. Yeah, and it's just, I guess, a development thing. Like most of the relational databases have been around since the 80s and had lots of security issues over the years. And NoSQL is kind of going through the same growing pains, I would say. It's just a learning experience, which you unfortunately cannot really fast forward with. Somewhere you need to pay that price. Yeah, other than that, I have lots of stickers here, if you want stickers. That's one of my main obligations, just to distribute stickers throughout Europe. Other than that, any questions? By the way, who is using MongoDB? Two admitted, okay. Redis? Okay, that is more. Elasticsearch? It's also more, okay. Very nice. Has anybody been ransomed? No? I'm always interested in stories from the field. Any questions? No? Okay, then.
I have a few questions. Okay, so you just talked about how SQL database systems have sort of a hardened security model that's grown over time naturally. And so my question for you is this: you talked about authentication schemes. You sort of glossed over though the Elasticsearch authentication scheme. What are some of the features of the authentication scheme there?
So since it's basic auth basically, so you have like if you have the paid if you have the paid version, you get TLS encryption but plus basic auth, and then you can limit that down to the index level. Like the index was the please read thing we have seen, or in the higher plan you could even limit that down to fields. So you could say, okay, everybody can see all the fields of the employees, but only the management can see the field salary. So you could limit that, or just documents, where you could say stuff like everybody can see all the documents, but if the deal was over 10,000 euro, only specific people can see the deal.
Okay.
And that is part of the cluster, so that is not a reverse proxy in front of it, that is really part of the cluster. And there is no easy way to circumvent it, so we have just stuff like aliases and to target multiple indexes or rename stuff. But that is implemented kind of in the core, so you cannot work around that in any way.
Okay. And then my next question would be, as a pen tester, I would be interested in seeing, okay, so you have an authentication scheme that I can't quite bypass. So do you have brute force protection?
Not that I'm aware of.
The answer is yes. Okay. Then my next question would be, do you have a way, okay, as a pen tester, I have the next question. Do you have a way to set up a password policy such that people actually create, or I guess for basic authentication? Yeah, let's think about it.
Password policy.
So it must be 13 characters long at least, a mixed case, numbers, special characters.
I don't think so, but it's only a REST API, so depending on how you interact with it, you can set up your own. Like we can hook into stuff like LDAP, Active Directory, like we can reuse that. So if you have a password policy there, we will just reuse that.
Okay.
Or actually, no, I don't have a. Yeah, it would take 2 minutes to start up the instance. We have a web interface. I'm not sure if we can set up a password policy. I don't think so. It's just like whatever your admin thinks is manageable, but can you set password policies in relational databases? I'm just thinking.
Yes. For example, MySQL, you can set up a password policy.
There's a password policy?
Yeah.
Okay. I would need to ask. I'm not aware if you can do it somewhere.
Okay. Does anyone else have any attack questions for our MySQL?
Maybe one more. I mean, if you do basic authentication over TLS, you talk about pinning previously used for that.
Certificate pinning?
And stuff like this.
Sorry, certificate pinning?
Yeah.
Well, wait on.
Sorry.
But where would you pin that on? In your application? I mean, that's up to your application then. I mean, it's not a browser, so you cannot use a browser certificate pinning.
No, I mean when I do the connection, I would just like expect the server to tell me like when you come again, then please use only this certificate when you use it yourself. Just to be sure who I'm talking to.
Yeah, but that's pretty much part of your client application, right? That would need to be implemented in your client application.
Yeah, definitely. But the server has to tell me that I get the header from somewhere. that I should.
Oh, but don't you get the right child back with the certificate as well then?
I think he's talking about something like HSTS for the REST API. I think that's what he means.
Yeah, but setting HSTS like in a client application?
No, because the HSTS header would be sent on the server.
No, certificate pinning header. He's talking about the certificate pin.
Yeah, I'm just talking that I just want to be sure which server I'm talking to. Just to be able to verify it, and then the server just sets the header in the response and tells me like, okay, this is what you should be seeing from the next request.
And X, is there a way to insert a header into the
Yeah,
login?
you should be able to do custom headers, yes.
So if there is a way to insert a header on the server side, you can implement it on the client side.
Philipp, when you're talking about security, is that including this Shield add-on or is Shield?
Yes, so we kind of did a renaming strategy. In the beginning, like before 5.0, everything was called after Marvel comics and stuff. So it was called Shield, Marvel, etc., the products, and we've kind of renamed that to more generic, boring names. So what was Shield is now security, and what was Marvel is now monitoring. Because it, like Shield kind of made sense for people, but Marvel was not really obvious what is Marvel doing. And Watcher was the alerting thing, and it's called now alerting. So yeah, what was Shield is now security. That's kind of the rebranding there as well. Yes.
I have one more question. One of the features that Elastic has is this distribution across multiple servers, right?
Yes.
How is authentication done there? So if you have two servers running Elasticsearch or Elastic Daemons, how do those authenticate?
Okay. So internally, it doesn't talk REST. It has its own binary protocol. Like 9200 is the REST API, which you expose to the outside, and the internal cluster communication is 9300. That's just Java protocol, and that uses security internally as well. But it's not basic auth because it's not REST anymore.
Okay, and assuming I'm on the LAN, so I'm on the internal network, how does it know whether I'm an allowed instance of Elasticsearch or not?
It uses SSL, and you have the credentials as well inside the cluster there.
Okay, so I have some kind of pre-shared key or something.
Yeah, there is so there are generally two ways to set this up. You can either have a configuration file, but it is not very convenient to add new users, and we provide a REST interface, and then we kind of store it inside Elasticsearch. So we have a special index keeping the users and credentials. So you don't always need to edit files. Especially if you have lots of servers, you don't want to edit the files on all of them. That can be cumbersome.
Any more questions for our NoSQL? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.